Okay, so I realized in showing you citing the other day that I omitted how to actually use it on your paper, which would be helpful. So it's not just about taking measurements and making comparisons by closing one eye, it's how do you get that information to your paper, to your canvas. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. It does begin with finding a single unit of measure. So I'm looking at the shoe today and I am getting the height of the shoe. You're seeing that with hot pink. And I'm going to take that height and see how many heights will fit within the width. So you can also just eyeball this too. I'm not telling you there aren't other ways, but this is a way that you can double check. So here's the height, and then I'm going to try and fit two or more of those heights within the width. So look at that. It fits almost two perfectly, except for there's a little bit of change at the end. That little bit of change you can guesstimate. So I'm going to take that same measurement, so taking the height of the crusty shoe, and I'm going to see what else I can use. Else can I place that? So I'm looking at the bottle, and based off of this image, I can get one and a little bit of change up at the top. So I can get one plus a little bit. So this helps as a basis for comparison. Here we are looking at the full still life setup. If you count, I don't actually have 7, I have 6, so I'm kind of cheating. So here's that height again, and then it's like, what else can I use that height? What can I compare it to? When you're doing this, you have to keep your stance solid so your feet don't really move. It's your arm that moves and your eye closes. So I can fit two heights of that shoe within that bottle plus some change. And then if I take the height of the shoe and I use it for the width of the bowl, it's exactly the same. So it's important to gauge things. Now I'm going to compare the height of the shoe to the width of the bowl, and they're about the same. Again, I'm going to take the height of that shoe and compare it to the height of the plant. And you can see I can fit 1, 2, plus a little bit extra at the top. So again, that extra, you're welcome to guesstimate. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this will help you with proportions and making sure that things are the right size and thickness, that kind of stuff. There are a lot of ways you can use measuring. So I would continue to measure. You can even measure negative space. If you're trying to figure out how much space to leave up at the top of your page or how much space to leave at the bottom, you can actually measure that too through that technique called citing. So I am going to show you this again, except for I'm not working on paper. I'm going to work on a whiteboard, and the purpose behind that is because I want you to be able to see the marks. I think before it was hard to see what I was doing, and I didn't explain it as well as I needed to. Here is the first thing you should do. So remember, I did tell you to work about life size-ish. If you have a really huge object, it's okay to condense a little bit, but I just don't want it to be teeny tiny. So the first thing that I do is I gauge a distance myself. So I'm getting the height here of the shoe, and I'm not literally transferring that height. I'm just making an educated guess on how high that height is from the bottom of the shoe to the top of it, and I'm trying to make it life size. So it can be any measurement, and you start that off as your point of comparison. Now once I have that shoe height on my paper, I can measure it on my paper. So I can measure and actually use the point of my pencil and my fingernail to measure that relative to my paper, flip it sideways. And we said, I showed you that it was like 2 plus a little bit of change for the width of the shoe. So using my measurement, that's how I get my unit of measure. It's on my page, not angular transferring it over. So here there are 2 plus a little bit of change. And you can see I'm actually using angular transfer to draw. I'll tell you how I draw. I draw very ugly at first. So lightly, you can't tell here because I'm using marker, but I do lightly and very sketchy gestural looking. These aren't cute drawings, at least not yet. So I always start off very rough, and then later on I start to refine. And that's actually where I have a lot of the fun, is because I have everything in place and I don't need to make a lot of corrections if I spend some time sketching it out and trying to get the height and width of things. So I'm starting off on one object and I'm working one object at a time, not getting a ton of information, just getting a overall form. So I'm switching to a blue marker so you can see that's my height measurement that I'm taking. I just put my fingers up there to show you that's my height measurement, and that's my basis of comparison for everything else in the drawing. One thing you should also do is imagine where things align up, the top and bottom of things. When I'm doing these forms, I'm checking out negative space because that does help me. So negative space is the empty space surrounding the object. So you can see that as a shape if you train yourself to. So anything that's overlapping, you want to see where it's hitting on the other object. That's a semi-sphere. It's not the best drawing, but it's a semi-sphere, and I'm looking closely at where that sphere hits the toe box of that shoe. And then there's a cube behind that. All of these are like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. They all fit together, but I have to look at how it's assembled in real life and translate that onto a paper. So I'm also using 1-point perspective because my understanding of 1-point perspective kicks in and it helps me get the angles of that cube, aka a box, in. Those dashed lines are to show you the indication of where they should be aligned. So you can draw those out. I don't typically. I'm doing that so I can show you what's going on in my head, but I will hold a pencil, close one eye, hold it out horizontally, and see where the top and bottom of those objects align. I'll also sometimes drop a plumb line. So there I'm measuring using the height of the shoe, the height that's on my paper, and that's going to be that spray bottle. Not using ruler, letting it be freehand. It's not going to be perfect, that's okay. And I'm looking where that bottle begins in relationship to the shoe and where it is closed off, which is a width. So everything is kind of interconnected. I notice that the bottle width is very close to the width of the cube. So sometimes it's good to measure this stuff out, like just close one eye and take some time measuring, memorize those measurements, and then when you get to your paper, you can recount them. So you don't always have to be measuring all the time. And I'm not telling you you have to work like this at all times, but it is a tool. Once you start incorporating that into your routine, it becomes easier and easier so that you can do it subconsciously. One thing that's also a pretty important thing to do if you're doing something that's symmetrical, if you're having trouble making it perfectly aligned or perfectly even on both sides, you just drop a plumb line down the center. I'm sure you guys know that, but I'm just putting it out there in case you don't. That's the bowl where the plant is contained. And look, see, I'm measuring. See, the bowl is just a little bit wider than the cube. So you can use another point of reference too. That cube is similar to the height of the shoe, but it's not quite, so you would measure that. And again, I'm using those alignment lines, those horizontal lines, to see where that bottom of the bowl, how that aligns with the sphere, and how it aligns to other things. And you can see I'm just measuring with my fingers. I do that too when I'm drawing alone. So I have my finger, when I'm doing those marks, those measurement marks, I have my finger on my pencil or on my pen in this case, and it's positioned with the thumbnail on that measurement so I don't lose my measurement. One thing I'll also do on organic shapes, so an organic shape is like anything that's a plant, something that is more freeform, that's not like a man-made geometric shape or form, is I will do a continuous line. That's what I do for a lot of stuff, which means you don't hold or you don't lift your pencil off the paper. So here I fast forwarded. I put a line in the background to represent the tabletop, but I'm filling in the negative space for you. And the point of that is not to try and recreate space itself. It's to show you that I'm looking at those pockets of open space, unoccupied space, and I'm seeing those as shapes. That helps me to be accurate. You can do that both on the bottom plane, which is your foreground, or in the background, which that background would be really hard to do because of all the plant stuff. You guys aren't required to shade in the negative space. I'm just doing it to show you how I'm seeing things. If you have extra time, sure, you can go ahead and shade if you want. You can put in a cast shadow, a form shadow, midtones, highlights, but that's only if you have time. I'm looking more at proportions and I'm checking out to make sure that you have the alignments correct. And I'm probably giving a little pointers on composition so that you can have success with your future paintings.